Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg appeared on Fox News and brilliantly pushed back against and dismantled the Fox News host Lawrence Jones's talking points. This comes in response to and in the wake of a pretty flawless night last night at the Democratic National Convention. So that's the subject matter that this is related to. Before jumping into a bunch of clips that I have for you, quick disclaimer: if anything seems more disjointed, the playing of clips, the cutting, etc., it's because I'm doing everything myself instead of having Jaden here, because I did test positive for COVID. I feel worse than I felt in a very long time, unfortunately, and so if my voice sounds weird or I am struggling to breathe, you know why. But I wanted to still do some content, so here we go.
Big showing for the president yesterday. They put him at 11 o'clock, though, last night. And a lot of people were saying, we love you, Joe. We love you, Joe. But he's no longer the nominee. A lot of questions, though, about it, because the New York Times writes that all the cabinet meetings that the president has been having have been scripted. They said 9 months since the latest cabinet meeting. Axios writes that he's only available for work between the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then the Wall Street Journal says when it came down to the debt ceiling negotiations back in 23, Nancy Pelosi had to take over it. Is this the reason why he's no longer the nominee for your party?
It's funny. Sometimes I feel like conservative media and the Republican Party still think they're running against Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. He had an opportunity last night to demonstrate his achievements, right? The fact that he is responsible, for example, mm-hmm. for the biggest run of job growth in the history of the American presidency. I think in any job, but especially the presidency, you want to be judged by your results. People want to nitpick the show flow of a cabinet meeting, mm-hmm. when we have had a country that, when he inherited it, was in a condition where you couldn't even approach the Capitol because of the violent assaults on the Capitol by Trump supporters. Not just getting our country moving on from that, not just getting our country back on its feet from the COVID collapse, but all of the other things that he did, including, by the way, delivering the infrastructure bill that Donald Trump promised and failed to deliver.
I know you got the talking
points. You want to go off how many hours he's in which office at what time?
But these weren't conservative outlets. I guess you can say the Wall Street Journal is, but
but you're a conservative outlet. And the first thing you're asking about is what time is it a cabinet meeting instead of his achievement.
I just want to know, when did you guys know that the president was unfit to be on your ticket?
The president is not unfit.
So why is he not the nominee right now?
Because he did something that Donald Trump cannot comprehend, which is to put his ego aside.
I just want to get my question out. Why did you guys wait to the last minute to switcheroo after everyone saw? Can I just finish my question? And I'll let you answer, Mr. Secretary. But you guys waited until after the debate, where everybody in America saw what happened that day. Mm-hmm. And all of these reports are coming out that you guys knew behind the scenes. The cabinet members were frustrated that he couldn't do the negotiations with Nancy Pelosi and that she had to take it over.
What negotiations with Nancy Pelosi? When was
the debt ceiling in 2003, when it came down to the debt ceiling negotiations, that she had to take it over because he didn't know the talking point.
He won the debt ceiling negotiations. That's the point. You can go over whether he slips up and says one name when he wants to say another name, or you can look at what he's actually accomplished as president. It turns out he's really good at being president of the United States.
Yeah, so a lot of this we've talked about already, and I have more to play, but a few things. The first is, it's interesting how for so long what we were hearing in right-wing media is that because of Biden's slip-ups, because of concerns around his age and mental acuity, he shouldn't be the Democrats' nominee. They'd say things to the effect of, this is so sad that they're making him be the nominee or something, even though obviously he had chosen to run himself. And this really shouldn't be what the Democratic Party is doing. But then he decides to step off the ticket, and now they're upset with that too, which makes no sense. The debate was a wake-up call for a lot of people, and for Biden it was a wake-up call that maybe the concerns, whether he agrees with them or not, are massive enough that electorally it would be really difficult to prevail. And he even said in an interview that the reason he decided not to run is because the doubts about his candidacy, the discussions of potentially someone else being the nominee, he understood that would dominate the media cycle for far too long, would serve as a distraction. They'd be talking about that instead of why Trump should lose. Talking about that instead of the strong record of his and Kamala Harris's administration. And talking about that instead of the stark contrast between the visions of the two movements. Which clearly ended up being the correct calculus. And then we've gone through some of the particular examples of reporting. Some reporting has been concerning about the behind the scenes, but some I was noticing Lawrence Jones sort of hyperbolizing or misconstruing. And I think Pete Buttigieg's core point is so important, which is, hey, maybe Biden was getting kind of tired later in the day. That happens. Maybe he does mix up names here and there, but look at his ability to govern, and a big part, like I've said to you before, of why it ended up being the right decision for Biden to step on the ticket is not just about governing now, because we're watching him do that effectively, but a whole 4 more years. And that also played into the decision. Here is more.
About the record of the Biden-Harris administration. When you look at inflation, it's up 19.4%. When you look at the southern border, it's 8.1 encounters. When you look at crime, violent crime across 66 major cities, it's up almost 10% at 9.6%. Is that a record that you can run on?
Well, certainly the Biden-Harris record of bringing crime down compared to why crime went up under Donald Trump. And I often wonder, whether viewers of this network are aware that violent crime went up under Donald Trump. I think that deserves more coverage so we can ask ourselves why. And some of that has to do with policy, but some of that has to do with the message we send. When you have Donald Trump, an unrepentant convicted criminal, running against a prosecutor like Kamala Harris, we have an opportunity to send a message about whether we're serious on law and order in this country or whether it's a talking point, whether it's just something people try to use as a political theme for partisan gain. You want to talk about inflation? Inflation went up in every country after COVID, but we brought inflation down in this country. Of course, the most important question, every election is about the future, right? And in the future, economists predict that the Trump plan will increase costs for American families by $3,900. So why would we go back to somebody's going to make it worse?
I don't want you to think that the crime issue or inflation issue is something new, because I've been covering it for years. I go out there and talk with voters every single day.
So you did cover the increase of crime under Trump.
Yesterday, I had the opportunity to talk with a mother.
Ooh, and that's where the clip ends, but I will play one more in a second. You notice he didn't answer the question that Pete Buttigieg posed, which is, you covered the spike in crime, the historic spike in crime under Trump, and then the historic drop in crime under Biden. No, you didn't. And one of the things Pete Buttigieg said here and has said before is, it's interesting. I wonder if many members of this audience, of the Fox News audience, even know that violent crime has been plummeting under President Joe Biden. Do they know that crime's currently lower than it was any time under Trump? Because it's a strange thing for Trump to run as the law and order candidate, not only because he's a convicted felon, but also because of the record of him versus Biden. And obviously the response to the spike under Trump that we've addressed so many times is, that was pandemic related. Yes, but his mishandling exacerbated, and then you don't take into consideration all the pandemic conditions as you can do with Trump. You can't take that into consideration with Biden, it seems, whenever you're talking about inflation or elevated crime levels that he inherited. That was his fault for many of you. And so then my question to the Fox News audience is, if you go look at the FBI data on crime in the United States, look at the trajectory under the Biden-Harris administration, and look at how that runs parallel to the largest investment in history by the federal government in public safety, including in part law enforcement, and think to yourself, that's a really consequential issue. On Fox News, they talk constantly about crime. How have I never heard this? How do I not know the basic crime-related truth in comparing the Trump and Biden record, and now the Trump and Harris record? How do I not know that? Maybe that's an indication that Fox News is not the trusted outlet that too many believe it to be. Here's more.
Back to you, Mr. Secretary. The people that are being killed in places all over the country, they look like me, they don't look like you. And they're upset with the Democratic Party not taking it seriously. You guys sent the cavalry in.
Not taking it seriously.
Hold on, let me finish. You guys sent the cavalry. You guys sent the cavalry in for you guys for your protection. But the people of Chicago don't see that on a day-to-day basis. What are you guys going to do to stop the bloodshed in our community?
Well, first of all, I was mayor of a city that faced that kind of pain. The toughest part of the job was dealing with gun violence, and the most heartbreaking part of the job was comforting or trying to comfort mothers who just wanted their child back. And the big question, I think, for politics, for policy, for media, is who is going to help them versus who is going to use them. The questions she's asking are the exact question any citizen should be asking, which is when you take office.
What do you mean?
Are you going to keep your promises?
Are you saying that mother is being used?
I'm saying that mother is asking the exact right question. And the question is, what are you going to actually do when you come into office? Now, we're getting a lot of people speaking up about...
Just tell me what you guys are...
I'll tell you exactly what we're going to...
It's insane to me. I think Pete Buttigieg will get to this, but just as a little intermission of this clip, that you could say, as Pete Buttigieg is calling out, sort of subtly, he didn't say you, Lawrence Jones, but the point he's making is it's networks like yours, it's networks like Fox News that every day exploit and, yes, use painful, real stories of people to push an agenda that isn't actually in the interest of those people. And so grab onto people's pain, use people's pain to further narratives that actually work in the interest of the side that's the opposite side, the opposite party that has overseen the largest federal investment in public safety and has overseen massive drops in crime. So when you're saying, what have they done? Well, that, for starters,
Tell me what you guys are.
I'll tell you exactly
what you've done to stop the bloodshed.
Actually confront gun violence. 90% of Americans, more than 80% of Republicans, think we ought to at least be doing universal background checks. But Donald Trump says no. The Republican Party says no. You talk about assault weapons, something that made a difference when that assault weapons ban contributed to the reduction in crime. I remember coming to Chicago as a kid. And by the way, even though some media only want to talk about the worst and most painful things that go on in our city. Chicago is a proud city. Chicago is an extraordinary city. But I do remember coming here when crime and murder was off the charts, and the work that went on to bring it down from those levels that we saw in the past, the work that's going on to save lives right now is something that deserves the backing.
There was over 20 people shot last week, 5 people shot over the weekend.
Then why would we elect leaders who won't do anything about gun violence?
Well, it's the Democrats that run the city. Name the Republican that is in charge.
All right, but this is really important, right?
No, tell me. One Republican in charge of Chicago.
Well, hold on.
Name them.
Listen to me, because not only did we have those levels of crime under Democratic and Republican leaders, right? But people try to cherry pick this for partisan purposes. You want to play that game?
It's not partisan.
We can talk about
As I told you, Mr. Mayor, they look like me, not you.
Yeah, and so is the case in Boston, where there is a much lower murder rate, and also a Democratic mayor. We could talk about how the murder rate in Mississippi is double what it is in Illinois. Now, I could go around saying that the murder rate in Mississippi is double what it is in Illinois because Mississippi has a Republican governor and Illinois has a Democratic governor. But you and I both know it just doesn't work that way.
I got you.
Just absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. Not ignoring, not making it seem like you're flippantly brushing off these horrific stories, but somehow managing to hear that and talk about what it is that we want to do to address gun violence, for example, contrasting what we want to do against the lack of action that Republicans are dedicated to. And then saying, and by the way, if you're going to do this blame game, partisan version of the argument, then sure, we can talk about how that 2020 study showed murder rates were 40% higher in red states compared to blue states. We can talk about how so many of the most deadly states to live are red states, etc. But I'd rather just skip over that part and get to how we implement solutions. And it's crazy to me that Lawrence Jones would cite how many shootings have happened in Chicago. Yeah, that's why we want to implement common sense gun reform. What are you talking about? Which party, both on a state level and on a federal level, which party consistently blocks common sense gun legislation? It's true, we have way more gun violence, way more guns, and they're way less regulated in this country compared to every other developed country. And I do think, while not violating the Second Amendment, we should do something about that through these sorts of solutions. Biden got a little bit on that front, the first major gun safety legislation in decades. But we do need to do more at the federal level, because otherwise, another thing we've gone through is you'll see from red states or lax gun law states to blue states, and then the cities that they on networks like Fox News fearmonger about, the guns are flowing from the lax states. People go drive over there, get them, and bring them, and that's the guns that are overwhelmingly committing, or that people are committing crimes with. And so we have to do something on the federal level to prevent that. And while I think the progress that's been made clearly with the rapid historic drop in crime has been incredible, and that should be talked about, as we are talking about the painful stories, which we also should be giving attention to. I wish they would properly contextualize these stories, but we should talk about them, and they should be motivators to do more. And one of the things we should do is push past the Republican obstruction on gun safety legislation that people like Lawrence Jones bolster constantly. He's on a network that promotes the very ideas that give Republicans the justification to prevent some of this legislation and prevent solutions. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments. If you want to support the work this show does, if you're thinking, wow, Luke looks distressed and disheveled in his illness, and I want to support the fact that he's still doing this show, you can do that by clicking the join button below.